Hello everyone, my name is Ása and I'm here with another lesson in the course Let's Learn Icelandic or Lærum Íslensku. And today I'm going to teach you how to pronounce some well-known Icelandic towns. Yay! This video is basically intended for two main audiences. First of all, people who want to study Icelandic in general, and then they can use these towns sort of to practice their pronunciation. And secondly, people who are planning to travel to Iceland or maybe already in Iceland, and then it's practical to know how to pronounce the basic towns. Up till now, I've made like 4,000 pronunciation videos, so I've pretty much covered most things more or less, but what I've completely ignored or sort of hidden from your sight is the rules about where to put the emphasis of words in Icelandic. But if you've gone through all of my pronunciation videos or most of them, you might have picked it up already, because the main rule is very simple, very simple. The main emphasis on Icelandic words is always on the first syllable. So always on the first syllable, and this is always true. Okay, so for example, like in English you would say November or December, but in Icelandic it's always on the first syllable. So you say November and December. So it's always on the first syllable. And in fact, I imagine if you listen to Icelandic people speak other languages, you might notice that they tend to do this even when you're not supposed to, because it comes so natural to us to put the emphasis always on the first syllable of every single word. So this is the short version of the truth, and it's pretty good actually. So if this is the level that you care about, then that is fantastic. Then, I mean, as a general rule, you can always just apply the main emphasis on the first syllable, and then you'll just live a happy life. If you care about the details, I'm going to explain because things can get slightly more complicated, not drastically, but slightly. And this is because in Icelandic we have a lot of composite words. Okay, we do this also in most of the Scandinavian languages, all of them I think, and also in German, and I think in many other languages where you just stack small words together to make one long word that means something different, but is described by these smaller words. And what we do then is typically that we put the biggest emphasis on the first syllable, but then when we have a long word and a composite word, we put a little bit of extra stress or an extra power when we start a new word in the big composite word. So one very simple example is, for example, the word fótbolti. Fótbolti. So this is the same word and is English football. So fót just means foot, or it comes from foot, and bolti just means ball. And as you can see, this is a word that's made up of two smaller words to make one composite word, and then we say fótbolti. And if you listen to the way that I stress it, the biggest emphasis is at the beginning, but we also put a little bit of emphasis to sort of tell you where the next base word starts. And this is something that Icelanders do constantly and completely without thinking and completely without even noticing that we are doing it. So basically the general rule is this: at the beginning you have the biggest emphasis, and then we put a little bit of extra emphasis where we start a new base word. To make things slightly more complicated, not completely, but slightly more complicated, we can actually have composite words that are based on other composite words. Okay, or we can have, so what do I mean with this? This sounds like random, this sounds very abstract, I imagine, but for example, if we say fótboltaæfing. Fótboltaæfing. And this is made up of two main words. One of them is fótbolti, which means soccer, and the other one is æfing, which means a practice. So it's like a soccer practice. And therefore, when we say this word, because these are the two components, the main two components, fótbolti and æfing, therefore we will put the main emphasis in the beginning, but we will also put some extra emphasis when we start the new main composite word. So we say fótboltaæfing, fótboltaæfing, fótboltaæfing. But as you know now, then fótbolti is also a composite word. So then when we say fótbolta, we also put a little bit of extra emphasis on the bolta. So it's like fótboltaæfing, where fót is the biggest emphasis, and then the next biggest emphasis is where we start sort of a new main word in the composite word, but we also put an extra sort of emphasis on every single syllable where we are starting a new base word. Okay, so this sounds complicated, but actually it's probably not so complicated. For Icelanders, this is very easy and it comes very natural. We do it without thinking. And the problem is that when you're starting to speak Icelandic, none of these words mean anything to you. So you have like a word that's like 20 letters, and to you it's just all one pla. I mean, you don't see where one base word starts and the other one ends. But once you do, it will come more natural to you to sort of treat them separate but still together. The thing about landmarks and towns and things like this is that they're almost always, not always, but the vast majorities of these names are composite words. So these are actually excellent things if you want to study this. So this is why I'm making this video. And because you have no way of knowing where a new base word starts or where the other one ends, I will sort of cheat a little bit. I will help you along, and I will make lines. I'll put the example of football here, football practice. So I will make lines to indicate which ones are the main words, and then I will make a dotted horizontal lines just to separate the base words, just so you can understand at least to some degree what is going on. I will only talk about the towns in the sort of the southwest of Iceland, and the reason for this is that if I talk about all the towns in all of Iceland, this will be way too much and you will not remember a single thing. Both you and I will go completely insane. So let's just focus on the towns in the southwest. I think it's very useful that before I say the name of the town that you try. Okay, and this is not because I expect you to do it 100%. It's more like the errors that you make are going to help you remember how to actually do it. If you just do everything completely passively, just repeat after me without ever trying yourself, it's much more likely that you will just forget. But if you try to say something on your own, like fótbolti, or you actually say fótbolti or something, and then you notice like, her O sound was different from mine, and then you take attention, and then you're more likely to remember it. So I strongly encourage you to, once the names pop up, to try on your own, and then I will pronounce it the way the natives do, and that way I think it's probably the best way to learn. So let's just get started. The first word that we have today is not actually a town per se, but it's the name of this region that we will be discussing today. And we typically call this the southwest corner, or, and now comes the Icelandic pronunciation, Suðvesturhornið. Okay, I will repeat now slowly and then at a normal speed. Suðvesturhornið. Suðvesturhornið. Okay, and this is basically the region where 6 out of 7 of the most populated towns in Iceland are. So this is a town that many people know because this is where the airport is. Okay, try to pronounce it on your own. And now I will give you the real pronunciation, and it might be surprising to some because we actually pronounce it as Keflavík. Keflavík. And notice that the F is pronounced like a B, like I talked about in some of my previous lessons where we discussed the F. So we say Keflavik. Keflavik. And Vik means bay, and you can imagine that there are so many towns around Iceland that end with the Vik, because most of the towns are close to the sea. So once again, the town of Keflavik. Most foreigners would pronounce this with an F, so if you pronounce it with a B, your pronunciation is already better than 95% of all tourists that come to Iceland. So we already won something and the lesson has barely even started. Keflavik. Keflavik. But the town of Keflavik is actually a part of a bigger town. So basically this is a town that is made up of smaller towns. And as you can see, the translation is Smoke Peninsula Town. And the Smoke Peninsula is basically the peninsula where you see the star. And this town is mostly famous for basketball and music. So at least when I was growing up, when you had the national finals, it was usually just between two different teams from this particular town. But now I think it's more diverse, but it still has a very strong roots of basketball in Iceland. And also of music, especially I think in the 60s, 70s of last centuries, there were a lot of bands coming from Keflavik in particular, but also from this area in general. And there you can find a museum about this and more. So now I hope that you pressed pause, try to do it on your own. So now I'm going to try to pronounce it with you. We would say Reykjanesbær, Reykjanesbær, or at a more natural pace we would say Reykjanesbær. So now let's move over to the capital, and this actually, the name of the capital means Smoke Bay. If you translate it to English, press pause, try to pronounce it on your own. I'm sure you heard it before. And now I'm going to pronounce it with you. We say Reykjavik, Reykjavik, Reykjavik. And as you can see, if you remember from Keflavik, both of them end with Vik, which means bay. And these two are not the only ones on Iceland, I can tell you that. There are very many towns that end with Vik, because they stand next to a bay. So our capital, we call it Reykjavik. Reykjavik. And like I said, Reykjavik is actually the capital of Iceland, so maybe it's useful to learn how to say capital. So capital, basically, if you translate it literally, we say it is called head city. So basically it makes sense, the capital is the head city of the country. Press pause, try to pronounce this on your own, and then now I will try to help you. Höfuðborg, Höfuðborg, Höfuðborg. And the reason for why I was telling you about the Höfuðborg is because this region, in general, is called the capital region. And this is because, like I said, it's almost 2/3 or close to 2/3 of the population that live in this region. And basically it's Reykjavik and surrounding towns. And when we say surrounding, they're really close. I mean, most of these towns, when you drive from one to the next, you don't see where one ends and the other one begins. Okay, and we call this the capital region. Höfuðborgarsvæðið. Höfuðborgarsvæðið. And now at a native pace. Höfuðborgarsvæðið. Okay, maybe that was too native, so I will slightly tone it back. Höfuðborgarsvæðið. So now I'm just going to go over these towns and tell you how to pronounce all the towns that belong to the Höfuðborgarsvæði. Okay, and let's start with this one. So here is a nice picture of the church, of one of the churches in this city, or in this town actually. And this town is the second biggest city in Iceland. Oh, it's not a city, sorry, it's a town. It's like 35,000 people or so, maybe slightly more. So it's not a city, it's a town. But it's the second biggest in Iceland, and the meaning of the word is the Sílpap Bay. And the way we pronounce it, I hope you already tried, but the way natives pronounce it is Kópavogur, Kópavogur, Kópavogur. Again, Kópavogur, Kópavogur, Kópavogur. Okay. And if you're really paying attention, you might notice that this is also translated as bay. Vogur actually also means bay, but the other one said vik, and that also means bay. And that's just a slightly different kind of bay, because we have a lot of sea and a lot of things, and we have a lot of words for these things. But I think for the regular person, you don't really care if it's a slightly more narrow, slightly more wider bay, you don't really care. So just for now, accept it that Vogur is also one type of a bay. And this town is, well, famous for being the second biggest town in Iceland after Reykjavik, and also for many other things. And it has the best swimming pool in Iceland, in my opinion. In anyone's opinion that has a good opinion. No, basically it has a very good swimming pool. It's like 50 meters and wonderful, and I miss it very much. Now we move a little bit south to another town that is significantly smaller, I don't know, like 12,000 people, something like this. And it means garden town. And this is famous because it has some neighborhoods that are very for rich people, let's say. So I think this is sort of the image that many people have of this town, that many sort of neighborhoods in this town are for rich people. But of course there are also neighborhoods that have a lot of non-rich people. But it's not so difficult to pronounce. I hope you tried it on your own. And the name of this town is Garðabær. 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 Now we move even further south, and this is a town that is called Harbórfjörð. I think this is like the third biggest town in Iceland. It's slightly smaller than Kópavogur, but not by a huge amount, but still some amount. And it's actually quite old on Icelandic standards, not on European standards. I'm not taking like 1400s or something like this, but it's quite old. So it has a very cute sort of city center. It has a very cute city centers with old houses, and it is overall a very lovely town, I would say. So the name of this town means Harbórfjörð. And as you can imagine, we have very many towns that end with the name fjord. So I hope you try to pronounce it, and now I'm going to help you. So the name is Hafnarfjörður. Hafnarfjörður. And notice here that the F in Hafnar is pronounced as a B, similar to Keflavik. And this is something that I covered in my lessons where I talked about F and V. So when you say Hafnarfjörður, you pronounce the first F as a B. So once again, Hafnarfjörður, 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 Hafnarfjörður. And this town, apart from being cute, it's also sort of famous for, like when you say blonde jokes in English, like a blonde that's very silly and stupid and does a lot of stupid things. We say these jokes about people from this town. So all these sort of typical dumb jokes about dumb people, we all say that these dumb people come from Hafnarfjörður. Normally the people from this town, they don't really mind so much. They're good sports, so it's not like it's super offensive or anything. It's also just, I don't know, stupid jokes, so I don't know. So now we've talked about all the sort of biggest towns that belong to the capital area, or the höfuðborgarsvæðið. basically Reykjavík, Kópavogur, Garðabær, Hafnarfjörður. But there are 3 quite small towns that also belong to this area. One of them is this, that is called Svan Peninsula. And I hope you pressed pause, try it on your own. The pronunciation is as follows. We say Álftanes, Álftanes. And here often the F is so soft that you can almost not hear it. And we say Álftanes, Álftanes, Álftanes. Or Swan Peninsula, because Alt is a swan, but we also have a word that's closer to English, which is svanur, but it basically means the same thing. And this town is most famous for the reason that our president lives in this town and always has, at least for, I think always, at least for decades. But basically the president lives in this house that is there in the picture, so this is why this town, Álftanes, is most famous. The next town is sort of like, we call it really the west town, or it's like the westest part of Reykjavik. You cannot very easily tell where Reykjavik ends and this town begins. If you translate it, it means something like Seal Pond Peninsula. Seal Pond Peninsula, and it's relatively small. And the way to pronounce it is Seltjarnarnes, Seltjarnarnes, Seltjarnarnes. So as you can see, this is the same as Álftanes in that it ends with nes, which means peninsula. And if you look at the map, you can see that these are 2 towns that sort of lie on a peninsula, so it makes sense that they're called Nes. And there are many other towns in Iceland that are called something Nes. But this one here is called Seltjarnarnes or Seltjarnarnes. Seltjarnarnes. And on a native speak, Seltjarnarnes. Seltjarnarnes. Now we're up to the last town of the höfuðborgarsvæðið, and this is the town that is called, and now I'm going to give you the pronunciation, Mosfellsbær. I will repeat, Mosfellsbær. And this means Moss Mountain Town. Mosfellsbær. And I think out of all of these towns, the only one that sort of is obvious that you're going to a new town is this one, Mosfellsbær, because it's a little bit outside of Reykjavik. And same goes for Álftanes. You have to drive a little bit, like 3 or 4 kilometers, where you have next to no houses. So Álftanes and Mosfellsbær, they sort of stick out in some sense, but Seltjarnarnes, Reykjavík, Kópavogur, Garðabær, Hafnarfjörður, these all are sort of like one continuous flow of a town that we call höfuðborgarsvæðið. So that was it. I think it was longer than I hoped it would be, but I tend to talk too much, but hopefully you learned how to pronounce these towns. If some of the pronunciation was surprising to you, don't hesitate to just check out some of my other pronunciation videos. This will be my last pronunciation video in a while, because I've already made like 4,000 of them. So I think it's time that we move on to other things. But stay tuned for the homework, where I will ask you to try and practice these towns once again, just so you won't forget. Bless, bless! So here are the towns that we talked about today. I have removed all the cheating help, so let's see how much you remember. Press pause and try to pronounce them on your own. Don't worry if you get something wrong, that's completely normal. Now I'm going to assume that you already tried on your own, and I'm going to go over the names of these towns fairly briefly. First we have Keflavík, Keflavík, Reykjanesbær, Reykjanesbær, Reykjavík, Reykjavík, Kópavogur, Kópavogur, Garðabær, Garðabær, Hafnarfjörður, Hafnarfjörður, Álftanes, Álftanes, Seltjarnarnes, Seltjarnarnes, Mosfellsbær, Mosfellsbær. Finally, here are a couple of words that we discussed in this lesson. These are not towns, but useful nonetheless. Press pause, try to see if you remember how to pronounce them and what the meaning is. Now I'm going to give you the answer. The first one is fótbolti, fótbolti, which means football or soccer. Fótboltaæfing, fótboltaæfing means football practice or soccer practice. Suðvesturhornið, suðvesturhornið means the southwest corner and refers to the southwest part of Iceland. Höfuðborg, höfuðborg means a capital of a country is called höfuðborg, and this is not specific to Iceland. This refers to any capital of any country is called höfuðborg. But then we have höfuðborgarsvæðið, höfuðborgarsvæðið, and this usually only referred to the region around Reykjavík. That's all for today. Thank you very much. Bless, bless.